afterwards.
Yeah, no worries.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Spotlight special with Alan Stenson. I'm your host, Maxine Crow, and we are here to shine a light on entrepreneurs, SMEs, and innovators. Alan, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm very good. Thank you very much. I'm shattered, but good shattered. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
And I love that we met. We only met a few months ago actually, but it
Yeah.
just seems like a long time, and we have mutual interests as well with Collider and your new partnerships and stuff. So I'm sure we're going to hear all about that in our session today. So I'm really excited to get to know you and deep dive a bit more into neutral carbon zone.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm absolutely delighted to be here as well. I really appreciate you asking me. But yeah, always happy to talk about NZZ and what we're doing. And it's like we were saying before. It's something that it kind of puts that spring in your step, even though there's so much to do and there's so much work involved. But it's great because it's good busy, which is the kind that you want. So yeah, delighted to be here.
Definitely. So just to kick off the questions, can you just briefly introduce yourself to the audience and introduce the business?
Yeah, great. So my name is Alan Stenson. I'm the CEO of Neutral Carbon Zone. We are a carbon management and certification platform. So we help organizations to report on and understand not just what their footprint is, but where within their organization those emissions are actually coming from, so that they have a much more successful route for where we take them from wherever they are now right the way through to net zero.
And what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
That's a really good question. I think it was more the fact that I wanted to perhaps be in a bit more control over what I was doing, and being able to sort of not just have a job, but have something that I was passionate about, something that I wanted to actually make a difference with, so that the work that you're doing and the hard work that you put in it has more meaning to it. And
Yeah.
I mean, a long time ago. I started in sustainability 17 years ago. So 2006, I set up a sustainability consultancy, and it was very much about helping organizations to really start that journey. But as you can probably imagine, back in 2006, and you're talking to people about their carbon footprint, you get a lot of blank faces. You get a lot of people that are not really interested, because it was so early on in that journey. So I can genuinely say, I mean, that was 17 years ago, and that was a very difficult sell at the time. And now, just the last 2 years alone are almost unrecognizable. I mean, the level of priority being applied to sustainability and the journey to net zero is just enormous. And it's a great time, because clearly, we've been here and we've been doing this for a really long time, but it's now there's much more of a warmer, open door when you're talking to people, because people realize that actually we do have to tackle this, and we do have to get involved in a way that means that we can take some responsibility, but also understand the value of the actions that we take, and understand the value of what we provide our clients and our staff and our customers and our suppliers, by working together and helping to make that clearer, is a definite advantage when it comes to cementing those relationships. So yeah, that's kind of what gets me up in the morning, and gets me working at silly o'clock in the morning, and then not finishing until silly o'clock at night. But it's all good.
And I think when you're passionate, so passionate about something, and I'm finding it myself, you start, and then next thing you know, it's like, where did all those hours disappear to?
Yeah,
And then you're just
yeah,
almost
literally, yeah.
gutted that you actually got to go to bed because you've got the next day to start. How did it? I know you said you started as a sustainability consultancy years ago, but
Mm.
how did you come up with the idea for neutral carbon zone? So for the audience to kind of understand the background behind that.
Yeah, so I mean, back in the early days, it was very much a case of working with an organization quite sort of manually. So you'd be looking at how to capture data from a client in a certain way, and you'd be looking at the sort of tools that you'd have at your disposal, and there's always the danger of death by spreadsheet, and one of the biggest tackles or the biggest hurdles that people have to face is being able to capture the data in the first place, and not drown in the complexity of it all. So it was really important to be able to take this a step further and actually enable technology to help us to make this so much more accessible and more successful. So a couple of years ago, I got together with one of my business partners, and Chris Stenson, and he we were mutually connected on LinkedIn, and he'd just left his role at one of the major FM companies, and we met up and just kicked it off really, really well. And we knew we had a lot in common in terms of what we wanted to achieve, but we were coming at things from a different perspective, had different skill sets. And also we had a couple of other partners that we then brought on to further that discussion. And then we very quickly got to the point where we wanted to create something that would be taking what I'd been doing over those, well, at that point, the last sort of 15 years, and really take it another step on. So that's where Neutral Carbon Zone came from. But the reality is, it's a case of utilizing technology to make things much more available, much more scalable. There's, we're now dealing with clients in different countries, in completely different sectors, and we're not limited in the way that we were before, which is for the future. I mean, it's fantastic because there's literally so much to do and so much we need to do. I'm so much more confident now that we've got the ability to make that possible. So it's exciting times, to say the least.
So just thinking about what you said of being digital and utilizing the technology, for any company or individuals that are looking to improve their carbon footprint or start their sustainability journey, I mean, is it difficult for them to start? Is it ease of implement? What's the ease of implementation for someone that hasn't started the journey?
Yeah, it's really interesting because whilst everybody knows that this is a very important topic and we need to be on top of it and we need to be engaging with it, there is no real one size fits all. So it's quite difficult for certain organizations, and if they've not done anything like this before, it's quite difficult to sort of understand specifically what they need to do. So it's really a case of looking at what's most appropriate for that organization. But I mean, generally speaking, an organization needs to be able to break down into achievable phases a proper carbon management approach. So looking at their organization, for instance, so the building that they're in, the staff that are in that building, the energy they're consuming, the fleet of vehicles that they may have, the relationship they have with their suppliers, what are they purchasing, what's being supplied, all sorts of utilities, their business travel, all of the elements that are integral into the running of their business. That's one thing. But then separately, you might have a service provider who has a completely a real, genuine requirement to be able to understand and communicate on the impact of the products or the services that they're providing. Yeah. So from their perspective, whilst they're doing everything they are doing for themselves as an organization, what's the relevance to the client that they're providing a service to? So it's a case of being able to then separately say, right, we've looked at organizational emissions. Now we need to tackle operational emissions. What is the impact of the service that we provide, or the products that we provide? A lot of people will obviously understand what the price of something is. You can see it on the bill, but what's the actual cost of doing business with someone? And what we're finding now is that there's so much more expectation being applied to organizations to, first of all, communicate and report on the impact of the spend that they have. So when they're spending money with a supplier, or they're spending money to source products or services, what's the impact of that spend? But also, if you flip that round, if you're the provider of those products or those services, if you're in a position where you can then demonstrate the impact of those products or services to the purchaser, then that's a really valuable piece of information, because it's information that they need, but they simply can't get without that insight, because they're not in control of it. So it's really about positioning organizations to be able to deliver that added value to their clients. So, and then on top of that, you've then got the supply chain. So we've got, one company might have dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of suppliers that they are ultimately needing to understand what the impact of that supply chain is. So that's another hurdle. And then when you bring all that together and you have all that information, and perhaps you've set some baselines, or you've understood where your carbon footprint is coming from, what do you do about it? How do we reduce that? How do we prioritize the areas that are going to deliver the most successful outcomes? So there's really sort of 4 phases to a proper carbon management program. But as I say that, I truly appreciate the fact that what's the right way forward and most appropriate for one organization might be quite different to what's appropriate or the right way forward for another organization. So it's really a case of looking at things in an individual setup, so that you can really tackle things in a way that's going to add the most value and ultimately give the most success to that carbon management plan.
Yeah, that's really insightful. And working in procurement, sometimes do you find that you have to think about the specific supplier and their services that they're delivering? Because how do you differentiate between, say, someone that's like a courier and they're going from A to B, so that's probably easier to identify and measure, versus someone else that's kind of probably not the same type of service that's tangible? So how do you support the ones where they may not be able to clearly put a finger on, okay, well, don't know how to work out what I'm emitting because of the nature of my service?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question, because it's about setting a boundary of assessment, so that you're looking at within that boundary, what's being included, what are we calculating, and then we do all sorts of things like life cycle assessment based programs, where you're literally modeling the emissions associated with a product or a service. So like contract cleaning is a classic example, where you've got an organization that might have a building where there's 50 people in it, but then you might have hundreds or even thousands of staff up and down the country cleaning hundreds of different facilities up and down the country. And that's a very specific service being provided. So it's about breaking that down and understanding what are the emission drivers within that service. So looking at, from a cleaning perspective, how are operatives getting from home to the site in the first place? And then when they're on the site, are they inside or outside office hours? So are they contributing to the building's emissions or not? Are they plugging in any machinery, and therefore are they using any of the client's energy when they're on that site? Are they having consumables delivered to that site? What type of consumables? Water consumption, waste? There's basically a whole boundary of assessment that you include, and that's going to be very different for every single organization and every single service line or indeed product. So it's fact finding. It's really establishing what needs to be included, and then creating a way to understand the impact of that, but then deliver that information in a way that's then relatable, so that you have something that will add some value to what you're doing. So if you know that there's an impact of the service that you provide, and you can identify what that impact is, and then identify what you can do about that impact, then any success that you have with reducing that footprint has a real knock-on effect, and a very positive effect to the people that you're going to be providing that service or those products to, because then they're benefiting from it. So then it really promotes a collaborative approach, and helps to deliver added value, so that you're doing this for your benefit, but also for the benefit of people that are buying from you or supplying you.
Yeah. That's really insightful, and I'm sure when we've finished, we circulate, and people will watch the recording back. But at least it helps them to start understanding where they can position themselves to then start to create a difference in terms of even beginning to measure. I'm gonna deviate a little bit because I'm really keen for the audience to understand the mechanics around NCZ. So could you just talk around the mechanics of it, the technical side of it, and use some examples as well of where you're actually helping others?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a certification program. So people access the platform. So when you become an NCZ member, you can access the platform where you can then provide all your data. You can utilize the different digital tools that are part of the platform as well. So the certification process is silver, gold, platinum. It basically takes you through certain levels of complexity, if you like, of your carbon footprint. So silver is very much looking at the organization. So that's an ISO or Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate standard compliant carbon footprint of the business. Gold is very much that and tackling the operational emissions, so the emissions of the product or the service itself. Platinum is the supply chain compliance, where you can then invite your suppliers to provide you with that information so that you can then communicate on the impact of your supply chain and what that impact has on you specifically. And then once you have all that in place, you've got the ability to then really tackle carbon reduction in a very targeted and strategic way, so that you're tackling the areas that are appropriate for you, that are going to deliver the most success for you, and then you can start to quantify the difference that you can make. So if you're looking at your footprint and X percentage of your emissions are coming from energy, for instance, and that's something that you can influence, if you look at various different options, what difference would that make, and what will that look like in terms of cost savings, in terms of carbon savings, and so on. And then also we've got the digital tools. So when you access the platform, in your profile, you can access things like our carbon neutral tender submissions, where if you're tendering for a contract and you want to deliver a real statement of intent to say, look, before you've awarded anything, just by reading our tender, you're doing something good for the environment, because we've had an independent assessment of all the emissions associated with the work that's gone into literally just submitting this tender in the first place. And then you've got things like carbon neutral meetings and events. So events, clearly, I mean, now it's Christmas season, organizations are putting their Christmas parties together, or maybe planning for the 2024 kickoff meeting for the team and what have you. And if people want to do that in a more sustainable and more environmentally responsible way, they can access it all through the platform. So you can set up the meeting in the platform. It will give you a unique data capture link, which then goes out to all the attendees, where we can then collate all the information required. We can liaise with the venue so that we can capture all the energy and whatever other related emissions are specific to that particular event. And then we can run the analysis and report on that event, and then balance the emissions, so that somebody can say, right, this is an event that we're doing now. We're going to make that carbon neutral, but we're also going to learn from that so that we can understand where those emissions come from. So when we put on an event, what are we talking about in terms of the travel associated with it, or when people stay in a hotel, or the catering of the event, or any aspect, you'll have the ability to understand the impact of that aspect and be able to then make changes. So future events, you can start planning them with carbon management in mind, so that know that by taking certain steps, you can stop the emissions from happening, or reduce the emissions from happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because there's a lot of, I know with corporates particularly, there's a lot of offsite brainstorming workshops that happen, leadership board meetings that happen. So there's and to be honest, you just explaining that to us now, we can actually impact and create and make a difference, even just from what you've just said there, just from having, and people I wouldn't have thought about it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's an emissions factor for pretty much everything that we do. So when you're on the internet, that you're generating emissions. If you're like say having a meeting and it's an in-person meeting that you might be having in a coffee shop or in a hotel, or there's an emissions factor for all of that. And if that's a significant part of what's happening within that organization, then by capturing that, by understanding what that impact is, you can then start to do something about it. And a lot of it is making people aware of the impact of the decisions that they make. And when you're deciding on what course of action to take from all aspects and from the top down, if you factor in carbon emissions in that decision making process at the very beginning stage, that's when you can start to ensure that you can deliver genuine change. But by taking that into consideration at the start, because a lot of emissions happen, just by the nature of what we do. So, like for instance, construction is a significant emissions driver within the world, and a lot of those emissions happen right at the very beginning. So when you're just extracting and transporting the materials being used to build a building, for instance, by the time you've built that building, that you've actually generated a significant amount of the lifetime of emissions of that building before anyone's even occupied it. So by creating the ability to factor in those decisions at that early stage before it's happened, it can have a huge impact.
Oh, that's really brilliant. I love the way you make carbon sound simple, which is what people need, because honestly, some people are scared to sort of say, "Oh my God, how do I start on my sustainability? Because I don't understand it." And you just make it really clear. Okay, so let's just talk about innovation now and some differentiation. So, how is your service different from what's already available in the market?
I think it's really a case of a lot of what we've done is been in the world of facilities management. So we've worked with a lot of product producers, a lot of service providers, where there's quite specific requirements for them, so that when we work with an organization, we're understanding what those requirements are. So we're speaking the same language, so that we can make sure that this is something that they can genuinely integrate into their offering, so that it becomes part of who they are, rather than just an add-on or a tick box exercise. So I'd very much say that by having that in mind, and we talk about doing things right at the very beginning, that's why, from having a tech-enabled solution, is that we have that in mind, so that we understand the problems that people face, the ability to engage people within the organization to be able to do what they want to do, the problem with capturing the relevant information that they need to capture, so that you can do this and do it credibly. All of those things are in mind when we've been creating the platform, so that it's much more user-friendly and much more accessible, so that people, and it's like you said, and I really appreciate you saying it, but by making it easy or easier to understand and making it relatable, that has a huge benefit, because with the best will in the world, a lot of people who find the responsibility of sustainability on their desk, they haven't been living and breathing all things ESG or sustainability or carbon management, at all, apart from maybe the last 6 months or so, when somebody said, "Oh, right, now you're going to be looking after sustainability." So it's a lot to take in, and it can be quite overwhelming, and the complexities of what they might need to do can drown people, because they feel like there's so much to do, but what should we be doing? Like, what's the best thing for us to do? So being able to work with people from that perspective, I think is a real benefit. But a priority for us is to make sure that tech enables us to make things more accessible, we're not trying to be a SaaS provider. We're not trying to just, the whole thing is digital and you just log on and you're left to your own devices. There's still very much a hand-holding exercise, because technology is fantastic, but there still needs to be some relevance to it. There still needs to be some understanding and some support, so that people understand that why I'm doing what I need to do, what difference does that make, how do I find this piece of information, and what is this going to look like, and then what are my next steps. So there's a lot of support that needs to go with it. So it's certainly not a faceless tech tool. It's very much it's passionate people that are using technology to enable this to be more successful.
Thank you for that. And speaking of more about innovation technology, how do you foster a culture of innovation in your organization?
So we have regular meetings to discuss the processes that we are going to follow, and the sort of the priorities that we have. So there's a balance on that, because there's clearly so much that needs to happen, and we're all very innovative in terms of what we know that we can do and the ideas that we can put forward. But you do have to focus on getting certain things done, so that you can have an idea, see it through, get it completed, and then move on to the next idea. So it's a case of finding the balance between all the things that can be done, but also structuring it and being accountable for what you're seeing through to completion, so that these ideas don't just get, they don't just fall by the wayside and not get completed. It's a case of prioritizing what we need to do now, and what we should be looking at for the future, so that when we're developing something, we are still developing it with the future in mind. But lots and lots of meetings, brainstorming sessions, coming up with lots of different ideas, but also talking to our clients as well. I mean, a lot of what we do, and the reason that I think we've been quite successful, is that in the whole time that we've been in the industry, we've got our ear to the ground. We're listening to what they need to be able to do. So when a client comes to us and says, we're being asked for this, or we're being asked for that, or it would be nice to be able to do this, so many ideas come directly from that. So definitely having your ears open and speaking to your clients and engaging with them as often as possible is I would highly recommend doing that to anyone who's looking at wanting to provide innovation moving forward.
That's great. Alan, can you share a success story with us as a result of what you've been doing so far with NCZ?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's I'm trying to think
so many.
it down. Yeah, I mean, being able to, so we work with a cleaning provider to establish the world's first carbon neutral cleaning system. So that was basically a past 2050 standards compliant life cycle assessment based carbon management program, which basically creates a framework of emissions specific to the activities that they're responsible for. So ultimately, when any one of their clients turns around and says, what's the impact of the business that we have with you? So this contract, what does that mean in terms of carbon emissions? And I think that being able to achieve something like that has been a real game changer, I think, within the industry, because it's answering the specifics. So you can have companies that are doing lots of different things, and it's great that they're doing that, but what's the relevance to the client that's being provided that service? So being able to drill it down into a working metric that can be used, so that they can answer that question to any single one of their clients that asks it is a massive win. And also another one was a carbon neutral meetings platform. So being able to create a meeting, through the tool, so that you can understand the impact of all the requirements of that meeting, so that when two organizations or two people or multiple people are coming together for a meeting, whether that's a digital meeting, whether that's an in-person meeting, they can actually demonstrate what the impact of that meeting is, so that everybody understands that, and it brings it into the forefront. So it makes it more mainstream, so people understand that there is an impact to the decisions that we make, and they understand what that impact is. So that was definitely a real game-changing moment. But yeah, and like in terms of an event, we were lucky enough to be commissioned to do. It was a major event in Europe where 350 delegates were flying in from 17 different countries, and
Wow.
our technology enabled us to be able to capture all that information for the client. So all they literally had to do was set up the meeting, and then deliver the data capture link to the attendees, which they did at the point of registration, so that we can then capture all that information and then provide all of the attendees of that event an understanding of what the impact was, and we can break it down country by country and really deliver some real insight into the impact of that event. And again, being able to do that was something that we couldn't have possibly have done, a few years back. So being able to do that now, it's a major win for us, I think.
So when you was just talking about that event in Europe, it brought to mind. So now that we're out of COVID and we're now meeting more, there's more conferences that are happening now, especially in the FM space, all the traditional, workplace futures and other IWFM and also industry conferences, the NEC XL, and I guess those are areas now where, if we've got carbon in mind, they should now be coming to you to say, right, can you track our impact? Because it's thousands and thousands that go through in, those couple of 3 or 4 days that sometimes they'll run these exhibitions for. So it's quite a great opportunity, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's making sure that people have the ability, because I'm sure lots of people would think, oh, that's a great idea, but then really struggle with actually, the mechanics of making that work, and how would we do that, and are we going to have to send out a spreadsheet to every single one of the attendees, and there's lots of problems that I think people would sort of see as ways that would stop them from doing this in the first place. So having a tool and having the ability to access that is huge. And again, we're learning. Everybody, we're understanding the impact of what we do, and then when we understand it, and then we can decide how we're going to change things, and if we change things, what will that mean? How will that look? So by capturing it in the first place means that you have that understanding, you have that insight. And then it's making people aware, so when they are coming to that next meeting or that next event, for instance, they might consider their travel arrangements. If there's multiple people coming from the same region, they might set up a car share scheme factor in a more appropriate venue for other people to access, and then what's happening at the venue, and what part of the venue are they responsible for, what are the emissions of the energy that they're going to consume, and so on. So there's a lot to factor in, but by understanding that and by reporting on that, you're learning the whole time, so that you can make some changes and then understand what the benefit of those changes will be.
Absolutely love that. Absolutely love it. So how do you manage the unique challenges that you're facing now with growing NCZ?
Oh, I mean, I'm very, very lucky in the sense that, we've got a great team, and everybody's very, very passionate about what we're doing. So the fact that, there's 10, 12, 14-hour days, what seems like every day, there's a lot of passion behind what we're doing. So it means that we want to be doing that. And we know that, by doing the hard work now, what we will be able to achieve moving forward is, it's almost limitless. I mean, it's really exciting. I mentioned to you before when we were speaking that I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and the fact that we collectively got together to set up something new, means that I'm loving. I mean, I'm absolutely knackered. Don't get me wrong, but I'm loving it. I'm really excited by what we're doing and excited about what we can achieve. And it gets you up in the morning. It gets you excited about it. And when you're doing a long day, the passion's still there, and the drive is still there to want to do it. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. You sometimes have to push yourself outside of your own comfort zone, and I was quite literally in a comfort zone. I knew what was happening, and it was a very much small team. If I needed to do something, I can do it when I needed to do it, type of thing. So I could work it around it. So very much a lifestyle business, and then changing that into a board of directors. Everybody's accountable. There's so much to do, and that everything's tracked, and we are genuinely doing what we need to do. That was a challenge in itself, to sort of come away from pretty much doing whatever I wanted to do as long as I got things done, to actually being fully accountable and having a whole team around me was a real challenge. But genuinely, as much of a risk and a challenge as that might have been, it was the best thing to do, because there's only so much you can achieve on your own. And when you have a team, and the right team around you, where everybody's passionate and everybody is interested in making this work, then it's literally limitless. I mean, there's so much that you can do and achieve. And it will always be more than you can do on your own. So yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for everyone around me, and for the passion that everyone's putting into it.
And what advice would you give to other SMEs that are looking to expand or innovate?
I would say, you've clearly got to keep an eye on the risk, and you need to understand the implications of the changes and the risks that you're going to take. But as long as you factor that in as best as you can, go for it. It sounds corny, but we talked about this. But if you're stuck in your ways and you're comfortable with what you're doing, that's fantastic. There's literally nothing wrong with that. But if you do have a drive and an aspiration to achieve a lot more, then get uncomfortable. Take that jump, and definitely make sure that you've got the right people around you, because it's not easy, as anyone who runs their own business will understand. But it's hugely rewarding. When you deliver something for a client that is game changing for them, then that's what we're doing it for. I mean, it's phenomenal. And then when you have dreams and aspirations as to what you want your business to be able to do, and then you start to see those come true, it's huge. I mean, it's literally it's what gets you going, and it's what gets you up in the morning, and keeps you working hard, because it's incredibly exciting, and it's nice to know that things can be done. Of course there's problems. We all have professional problems, we all have personal problems, and there's always something that will be a challenge. But to keep going and to find a way to still make it work, and being a bit flexible and being able to pivot when you need to, but still keep the goal in mind, that what you're actually doing this for. Then there's so much you can do. I won't go too far into it, but it's almost limitless. So yeah, I would say just go for it and make yourself uncomfortable. Factor in the risk, so do it as safely as you possibly can. But genuinely, just go for it.
So that thank you. That said, being limitless, Where do you see NCZ in the next 5 years?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I mean, we've got some big goals in mind, and I think so what we're focusing on is as I said, the tech enabler. So being able to have something that is infinitely scalable, so that we can deal with, organizations and service providers and product companies and events and whatever it is that we're providing. We can do that just as easily as we can here in Manchester to someone in Madrid. It doesn't matter. So we can, we've literally just launched in the UAE. So the team in Dubai are busy making waves over there, which is a whole other region that is needs to be tackled. Like I said, we're doing things in Europe now. So being able to scale this up and have the solution in terms of the platform that can handle that. Before, even just a few years ago, if we signed up 100 new clients, we'd be in trouble, because how do we deliver all of that to those clients? Whereas if you've got a platform that can handle that, then it's so much more scalable, and there's so much more we can do. And then of course that then opens up other opportunities and other aspirations for us as a provider of that service. So it's like we're saying, the innovation's there, and there's so many things that you can do. So we're focusing in on the short and medium term goals, but keeping the long term goal in mind.
And being the entrepreneur, because I know what that spirit's like, and you want to just be like, oh yeah, let's do. We've started that. Oh yeah, let's do. Yeah, I do get that very much so. So what's the best piece of advice that you've received as an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. So we've, and I'm sure lots of organizations would have gone down the route of funding and how to scale their business. I think the best piece of advice is getting the fundamentals and the foundation in place first. So by really clearly defining what it is that you can offer, and doing something quite specific, but doing it really, really well, and then having some track record, so that if you want to go down the route of funding and really scaling the business up to a whole other level, you've got some track record to show. So there's proof of concept. You can go in and say, well, look, we started this with nothing, and look what we've achieved over the last 3 years, for instance. And then you've got a lot more value to what you've created, because it's difficult. You don't necessarily want to give things, give a chunk of your business away. You don't necessarily want to hand the reins to other people, for instance. So like some people really struggle with gaining more staff and having more people that will have an input, because they feel like they're losing control. So there's always a balance, I think. But if you keep going back to simplifying the process, and keep going back to what it is that you do and what it is that you're looking to achieve, that will keep you centered, because you can go off in tangents, and you can go down a route that you think is potentially an exciting route, and will go on to provide you with other benefits. But is it in line with your core offering? So I think it's making sure that you've always got sight on that. But know what you do, be able to communicate on what you do, and to make it as clear as possible, and then do that really, really well. And then when you've got that in place, and that process is in place, then you can start to scale it up, and then you can start to branch out into other areas that would benefit from that expertise. So it's very much keeping a handle on the core offering, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. So thinking about work-life balance now, how do you actually maintain your work-life balance?
Oh yeah, that's really Genuinely, that's really tricky.
You're under the spotlight now.
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, anyone who's passionate about their job and anyone who's focused on trying to achieve something. I mean, yeah, you don't want to become obsessed, but you do want to be dedicated and you do want to give it your all. And that's tricky. It's a tricky balance. I try my absolute best to not work at the weekends because you can do 14-hour days, but if you don't have any downtime, then it's going to start to cause you problems, and you need to relax, and you also need to reflect as well. You need to come away and forget about things, and then come back to things with a fresh mind. So I try my best to not do anything over the weekends. I don't always achieve that. I do sometimes achieve it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Alan. Because when the passion takes over, you could literally do this day in, day out. However, health and well-being is still. Oh, we've got a comment actually. Health and well-being do have to come first.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a comment actually. Jasper, hi, thanks for joining us. He said, a tool like that is really like this is really needed. He said he's in charge of sustainability at the World Championship at horse riding last year, and looked at measuring emissions from the guests and participants. And I'm sure that something that you share here today would be very useful. So what we were explaining earlier about the events and the meetings, then I think it's just got potential to benefit many.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Jasper. And
Thank you, Jasper.
I think it's becoming so. I mean, people are much more aware now that they need to be responsible for their actions, and it's we're starting to see that there is an implication to what we do, and so there's more of an appetite to do things. So of course, if there's an appetite to do something, facilitating the ability to do that is really important, because otherwise you're left with people that want to do something but don't really know what to do. So yeah, that's been something that it was a real priority for us, because I know that having dealt with so many different organizations, that there's individual requirements, there's lots of things that people feel like they should be doing but don't really know how to start. So your question right at the beginning was, how do companies start? I mean, like I said, there's no one size fits all, but there is a way to break it down to make it more achievable. So taking things in achievable chunks to make sure that you can progress through that journey and not just try and throw yourself into it and then drown in the complexities of the whole thing. It's about breaking it down into achievable measures. But I'm glad to see that there's championship horse riding. That's another industry that we'd love to get involved with. I mean, one of the sort of tricky elements is that every single company and every single event and every single product needs to be now starting to consider the implications and the impact of that product or that service. So it makes it hard to narrow it down. So we've done a lot within the facilities management industry, because a lot of our history of the board come from that background, but also there's things that we're now doing in the golfing industry, and starting to move into football as well, and so there's so many different aspects. So it's about finding the balance of being able to provide something that anybody can access, but also giving it to them in a way that is relevant and specific to them, so that it meets their requirements. So that's probably why we're doing 14-hour days, because we're trying to make sure that we can do that. But that's the challenge, and that's why we're loving it.
There's a message. My sister in the US, she's saying, work-life balance is essential for success.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I mean, we joke about it, and we all like to get passionate about what we're doing and work these silly hours, but you can't keep doing that. You do have to relax and switch off. And I'll bring that back to the fact that whilst I made myself uncomfortable going and taking some of the control away from myself and having a team and doing things in a very different way. That one of the benefits of that was that when I finally went on holiday in June, and I was able to switch off. I literally said to the whole team, I'm unplugging from the grid. I'm, for the first time ever, I think, I'm not even going to be checking my emails on my phone. I'm going to completely switch off. And it was such a fantastic week to be able to recharge, kick back, relax, and just, you know, get back to the important aspects of personal life. And it was really needed. So then when you come back, you're more refreshed and you've got a better outlet. But yeah, you can't just keep plugging away and doing long days and work every single day and not take any time off. I think it's not healthy to do that. So you definitely need to get that balance right.
Yeah. So let's just talk about yourself now. Is there a book, podcast, or resource that has been particularly influential for you?
That's a really good question, because we have to do a lot of research in terms of different subject matter pieces. So there's a lot of different sources of information, and I'm struggling to think of one specific one to give you, because there's lots of different ones, and obviously information comes in different forms and it has different connotations as well, and so it's about making sure that you can research something and then back it up with a different opinion or a different angle on things. So I'd say do as much research as possible when it comes to all things sustainability. But look at how it reflects on you and what you're trying to provide, so that you can genuinely deliver that value when you're providing something for your client. Because it's easy just to sort of get a badge or a certificate or you know, look a certain way and to tick the box. And whilst that might not even be a bad thing, I mean, you might be doing a good thing by doing that in the first place. But if it's just a tick box exercise, then it's tricky to respond when the specific questions start coming up. So if you're going to do this, do it properly, get involved. I often say to people, when you see emissions, think pound signs. So if you can reduce your emissions, you can reduce your costs, and therefore by implementing things in that way, that's beneficial to the business. And then if by doing that you're providing something that's beneficial to the people buying from you, then everybody's winning out of that. And again, you've got to have that balance. It's got to work socially, it's got to work commercially, and it's got to work environmentally. And if you haven't got all three aspects in place, then it's not a sustainable offering. Sorry, that was a long-winded way of answering your question.
That's okay. That's why it's a spotlight special, so we've got time to.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the government? I mean, just thinking about governments and policies, and do you get involved with any conversations at all with their sustainability targets? And
not necessarily from a governmental perspective, albeit I do get asked to comment a fair amount, and I think, again, it comes back to, I mean, basically most of the work that we do is in the voluntary sector. So there's a reasonable amount of compliance work and legislative work that needs to happen, certainly for some of the larger organizations. But we get involved in that because even if we're not dealing with the compliance aspect, we're probably dealing with a supply partner that's providing one of those larger companies with a service, and therefore they need to respond to that larger company about the impact of what they're going to be providing and how it reflects on them. So we very much bring the two together, which is why we do get a lot involved in a lot of those aspects, things like SECR, ESOS, and so on. So there's lots of different aspects from that perspective, but it's really alarming when you start to see a backtrack from the government in terms of what we need to be doing in terms of the direction that we're going. And I was just recently at an event at Wembley Stadium, actually talking about from the construction industry's perspective, where emissions are, and the role that we have to play and what we need to achieve. And one of the things I mentioned is that we have a carbon budget in order to keep things like the Paris Agreement alive, i.e. limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees so that we have a livable future. In order to keep that alive, there's certain things that we need to achieve within a certain time frame. People are seeing net zero as a 2050 deadline, which legally, yes, that's the case. But in order for that to still be possible, we need to be reducing our emissions by half by 2030. And as we now know, 2030 is really not very far away. So, we need a significant reduction in emissions. And to put some sort of perspective on that, the level that we need to be reducing our emissions by is to the level where we globally recorded emissions back in 2020. And as everyone will remember, back in 2020, most of the planet was in lockdown. Yes. So that's how much of a reduction that we're talking about. So there's so much that needs to be done, but there's so much that can be done. So making sure that we are forging ahead and we are pushing towards achieving those goals, rather than what seems to be happening at the moment as a bit of a backtrack from that. I'm not sure now that the appetite and the understanding is there in the mainstream, so people understood. I mean, COVID was a horrific experience, but one thing it did show us was that when you reduce those emissions, nature comes back. Things we did reduce emissions. It can happen. It's not that it's impossible or it's some conspiracy theory. It did happen. So it's a case of people understand that we can't carry on going the way we're starting to see extremes in weather. We're seeing issues that if they continue to get worse, which they will do as the planet warms, we can't survive in the way that we are surviving with that trajectory. So we're currently emitting 3 times the level that we should be. So we need to reduce that. But by reducing that and understanding it and understanding where those emissions are coming from, then it's easier to see that we can do something. We can make that change and we can make it happen.
Yeah. Do you have any webinars or planned events coming up in the near future that our audience can register or tap into to learn more?
To be honest, I haven't even checked that far ahead in my diary. I know that we, some of the team over in the UAE have got several meetings over the COP28 period. So there's some elements there. Some of that will be recorded. And apparently there are a number of different podcasts and speaking events. So I will be sure to make you aware when they happen. Off the top of my head, I don't know when they are, unfortunately. But I'm trying to again not look too far ahead in the diary, because I'm focusing in on the sort of, but certainly not in the next couple of weeks. So, but as soon as I know, I'll definitely let you know.
Oh, thank you so much. So I want to just really thank you for your time today. Do you have any words of wisdom that you could share with the audience, things that some key takeaways?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I've been looking forward to this. And it doesn't take much for me to want to talk about the subject matter anyway. And the fact that when we first caught up, we were both getting excited about what we could talk about.
Yeah, we were.
Genuinely really pleased to be here. So thank you for having me. And I'd say, when you're looking at what you're trying to achieve from, the perspective of your own organization, it's about looking at the bigger picture and understanding what it is that you're trying to achieve. And just we're trying to learn from this. So, when you're looking into where your emissions are coming from, see it as an insight into then being able to do something about it, so that when you see the true picture, you can then start to target the elements of your footprint that will deliver the most success. And without really analyzing it, it's difficult to understand, well, what should you do? Because as I said before, what might be appropriate for one organization might not be appropriate for another. I mean, I can't turn around to a haulage company and say, look, the answer to all your problems is to do fewer deliveries, because that's not going to fit within their business model. So, we need to look at a way in which they can adopt more sustainable practices. What is available to them? What's appropriate for them to look at? And what kind of difference would that make? But yeah, just if you found sustainability is on your desk and you're now the person that's responsible for it, by all means, give us a shout, because I'd be more than happy to help. And, even if we don't end up, providing any services for you, I'm certainly always happy to discuss, what options are available. But yeah, break it down into achievable chunks. Look at you, the business, then look at you, the product or service provider, then look at your supply chain, and then look at, with all that information, what can be done to decarbonize the whole process. But communicate, reach out to people, reach out to your suppliers, reach out to your customers, find out what they want, what would be important or valuable for them to receive from you. And then is there a way that you can then incorporate that into what you do, so that you're really helping them to get what they need from you, and by doing so, you're also learning about your own business and what you can do. But yeah, it will take some time, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it genuinely can be done. We can do this, and by taking action now, we're in a good place to get things done.
Yeah. Alan, how can we get hold of you? What's the best way for the audience, if they want to get in touch with you, to reach out?
Happy for anyone to drop me an email. It's alan@neutralcarbonzone.com, or you can give the office a call, 0845 094 5976, or just jump on the website, neutralcarbonzone.com. Lots of information on there, and just reach out. And the LinkedIn NCZ page has got lots of information on there as well about what we're doing, some of the events that we're attending, and some of the innovations that have come out, maybe some of the projects that we're supporting, and innovations that we're creating. We've got planting events coming up in February, March time through our Tree in a Million campaign, which is our UK-based reforestation program. So if people want to get involved in a planting event, let us know. That would be something we could definitely do for you. But yeah, just keep looking at the socials, and no doubt there'll be plenty of announcements on there.
Oh, Alan, thank you so much. This has been a Spotlight special with Alan Stenson, CEO and founder of Neutral Carbon Zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Take care.